think about the geoeconomic and geopolitical issues that could inspire a stronger conversation and tighter links between the two sides of the Pacific. The idea of this dialogue is to test the strength of the Trans-Pacific idea politically and to invite the countries of Latin America themselves to play a fuller role in defining and developing the Trans-Pacific idea, and to invite the countries of the Asia-Pacific to perceive in Latin America opportunities for true strategic partnerships. This first plenary examines the Pacific Alliance and the Asia-Pacific and asks the question, what future cooperation? And we look forward to 4 individual statements from each of the 4 Pacific Alliance countries, but also to emerge from this discussion perhaps a sense of how the alliance, as they say in Spanish, en sí, might develop a stronger relationship with not just countries of the Asia-Pacific, but perhaps institutions of the Asia-Pacific. I will be inviting each of the ministers to make some introductory remarks of 8 to 10 minutes from that podium. And once the 4 have made their introductory statements, we hope to open up a conversation. And in order for that conversation to work and be easy and constructive and raise ideas, everybody has more or less their own microphone or one that they can share. If you wish to catch my attention, please raise your name board, and I will recognize you. And when I do recognize you, press the microphone, ask your question, make your comments. If you have ideas you want to test yourself, please put them. Interventions we would prefer to be 2 or 3 minutes in length, whether they're a question or a comment. And I'll probably collect a few and then come back to the panel. These plenary sessions are on the record, but I hope we can exchange lots of fresh ideas during them nevertheless. So without further ado, I'd like to invite each of the ministers to address us. It's a real pleasure to ask first Maria Angela Holguín Cuellar, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia, who I actually first met almost exactly 12 months ago in this city of Cartagena de las Indias on a visit that the then Foreign Secretary William Hague was making to Cartagena, and we enjoyed a conversation in the open air of the old city in which we talked a bit about this idea, and it's a delight that it's now been realized. She has been an enormously successful foreign minister of the Republic of Colombia and has had a long experience of international affairs and has given Colombia's foreign policy a dynamism and energy of which everyone has taken note. So, Maria Angela Holguín, that podium is yours. Thank you very much.
Bueno, buenos días a todos.
Well, good day to all of you. It truly is a pleasure to be here. I know that Minister Pinzón and the President yesterday welcomed you to Colombia, but I cannot be here without welcoming you again. It truly is a pleasure and an honor to have each of you here in Cartagena for these 2 days of work, which we hope will be fruitful for everyone. We would like to thank John Chipman, the Chief Executive of the IISS, and to Minister Pinzón for their initiative and for having brought us all together here. They gave us 10 minutes. So what I want to do in 10 minutes is to try to transmit to you how important it is for Colombia, this Trans-Pacific Alliance, how important it is for us, our relationship with Asia, and how important being with Chile, Mexico, and Peru is to us as our great partners as we arrive in the continent. I always say that we're arriving 20 years late in Asia. Unfortunately, our internal situation and our conflict has meant that Colombia did not look far beyond a few very close strategic partners due to the situation we were experiencing internally. But thanks to our military, which I see here today, and I salute the effort that has been made in security, and thanks to how we can project ourselves as a country, we can go far beyond those traditional partners. This is something that we have achieved and have been working on in the last 4 years. The Pacific Alliance, without a doubt, is the best thing we have done in this regards. What happened to us with the alliance? We found 3 partners that had exactly the same vision as we did. 3 partners that had, for other reasons, had been able to arrive sooner than us in Asia. They had signed commercial agreements. They had achieved a certain positioning that Colombia didn't have. And that's why for us, the Pacific Alliance has been especially enriching, because the company of these 4 countries has allowed us to prevent errors, save time. There has been much learning from their experience in the great continent that is Asia, and that's why we will always be grateful to Chile, Peru, and Mexico, because it has opened space for us. What have these countries done? These countries opened their economies. They supported entrepreneurship in every sector without wavering, and stimulated competition. This has been vital for the growth of Chile, Peru, and Mexico. This is the path to follow, and for that reason, we entered the Pacific Alliance convinced that that would be the way to reach Asia. Over time, we've noticed that we are a more attractive country than we imagined initially. And that's why Asia is our main objective. But we go a bit further in our relationship with Asia, Africa, Europe, which were not our traditional partners, but whom we are now drawing nearer to. What we've been doing is sharing this vision of sustainable growth that requires that our business people connect with global consumer trends and the latest advances in technology. We're clear in that we are coming closer and integrating ourselves among these 4 countries in order to connect to the world. It's not a static process, and this alliance is not an objective. It's an ongoing process where creativity plays a large role. We've been investing in creativity so that through these pillars, which is the free circulation of goods, capital, and people, we could reach the world. The alliance is not a static integration. It's a process that grows every day and is richer every day as a function of each of our 4 countries and the creative investment of each of those countries. We are all each convinced that this is the best path to help our business people and our SMEs, because that's an important component of the alliance. We've given SMEs great importance, and we want them to be part of those global value chains. That's our objective. So that's the value of the alliance, a union of these 4 countries that allow us to become a part of the larger world. And the 4 of us agree that this is the priority. One might say, why Asia? It's a question that many already imagine has been answered, but it is important. What we saw in the 18th century in the Mediterranean and the north of Africa, we can say that that was the center of the world. In the 19th century, the Atlantic Ocean and the development of the United States became the new feature. But today, what we can see with Asia, we're seeing the Pacific become an axis of the global economy. And Colombia, unfortunately, spent a long time facing away from that great ocean. But what we're trying to recover in Colombia, and we've discussed it a lot within Colombia, is that we want to be in Asia. We have several embassies, but very few compared to the relative importance of Asia in the world. So we reopened our embassy in We've opened a series of consulates, especially in China, that allow our relationship to Asia to transmit the message that we are here to stay. When I say that we need to be creative, one of the things we've done is open embassies in conjunction with the other countries of the Pacific Alliance. It's clear to us that it's very complex and very difficult from the perspective of the Ministry of Finance to open an embassy. But what we've been able to do is to open embassies in places where some of the countries of the Pacific Alliance were not present. One example is Ghana. The four of us had very little representation in Africa, and the four of us are now present in Ghana, working in coordination and cooperating. And the manner in which we've taken up this space again, in Colombia we are in Argelia and in Morocco, in Chile's embassy. In Singapore we are in Mexico's embassy, and in Vietnam we are in Peru's embassy. So this allows us to be present in each of those countries. We have personnel in charge of commerce and people working day by day to bring these nations together at a lower cost. So some of the important themes of the alliance, here we've tried to break down the topics so that each of us don't repeat ourselves. But one issue is foreign relations. It's been interesting to have a different mechanism of observer countries. Usually, what we have is that observer countries meet once a year with the participating countries at the summit, and they are informed of what has taken place in the alliance or in any other mechanism within a year. But we wanted to go a step further. So we were able to establish some observations. We already have 32 observer countries. We recently received the wonderful news that Indonesia presented its request to be an observer, and we're very pleased that Asian countries are seeing that we can work together. So what this has done is that each country is a world apart. It's about what each country is interested in. It's about facilitating commerce, facilitating customs, facilitating the free circulation of people. Migration is very important. Each country chooses how to become a part of the alliance. Personally, I would say that I wish we could make more progress. Last year, we spent a lot of time on the trade agreement, which was approved. But in this issue of relationships, we do think that it's worth the investment. We've discussed this among the four of us. But we do need to create the environment so that countries feel that being an observer of the alliance gives them an advantage. And we have to work on integrating the private sector, SMEs. These are some specific aspects that doubtlessly will enrich these relationships. So what we do with the alliance, it's something like a complement to the trade agreements. What these trade agreements did was help us to reduce costs in the circulation between countries. The alliance allows us to work on these topics and much more. For instance, the issue of migration. Colombia was a country where mobility was complex. The amount of countries that asked us for visas, as was the case with Mexico, for instance, it was a country that many Colombians wanted to go to. They wanted to travel to for work or for pleasure, and the visas made this difficult. This was a first step made, and the Mexican government did not waver. It was important for us to eliminate the requirement for visa. And we've seen the benefits of the free movement of people. It has allowed business people, small business people, and tourists to be able to move back and forth between these two nations, which is key. In terms of other topics, student movement, for instance, we're convinced that this is an important issue because getting to know each other is crucial. Each country is offering 100 undergraduate and graduate scholarships, and already more than 500 students have spent a year in an exchange program in one of the other countries of the alliance. This helps us to privilege knowledge, and each of these young people becomes, in a certain manner, an ambassador for their country. So, without a doubt, there has been progress. There are other needs, and that when students go to another country, they must be able to work. So we're also working on the regulation in this regard. And we will no doubt make progress. We have made some shy steps with regional mechanisms in Asia. ASEAN is an example in the region, important to follow. It's a way of ensuring that the region is stable, prosperous, and competitive, regardless of the differences between countries. So we held a first meeting. As I mentioned, we are in the process of arriving at more concrete results, and there's still ways to go. Likewise, what we want is for each of these countries in Asia to identify what their interests are with each of us and with the alliance as a whole. But this exercise today, where many of you, I'm convinced, had never been to Colombia before, you're going to find out about some features of the region that you were not aware of. And that's what we've tried to do in different parts of the world. Get together, the four of us, conduct seminars, go to fairs, do press rounds. These are all ways of showing who these countries are. The alliance is only 3 years old, but it's a way of showing that we are potentially attractive to Asian countries. And just to wrap up, another important topic in foreign relations has been with the IDB and with other organizations. The IDB has been working with us from the beginning. They have done specific studies for everything related to market aperture. They've done studies with SMEs. And of course, each of us have barriers, but we've been taking a look at how we can make more connections between our different mechanisms, the mechanisms that each country develops due to different circumstances. So this has been extremely helpful on the part of the IDB and the OECD. Whatever we do is never quite enough, but I have always believed that creativity counts for a lot. Unfortunately, among the foreign relation ministers and the trade ministers, I'm the only one that's left from the origin of the alliance. But I think all of us have begun to realize how attractive and how important it is for each country. We had a change of government in Chile, Peru, and Mexico, but the alliance, in some manner or another, sometimes it can take us a little longer than we expect, but it is, without a doubt, important to each of the four countries. And this is something that, little by little, we have to continue to consolidate. We cannot allow the alliance, for any reasons, we cannot allow the governments to block them or to set it back, because I'm convinced that with the very important numbers that the alliance has been showing, united, we are the 8th largest economy in the world. We have an average growth of 4.3. We have 50% of the exports of the region, 40% of foreign direct investment. So those numbers and that reality that we've been able to see in terms of how attractive we are, we can't let a change in government to run that down, or differences in opinion. So we have to come together and continue down this path, being convinced that the alliance is very important to the growth of our four countries. Thank you.
Foreign Minister, thank you very much for those remarks, and I note with interest that Indonesia has now applied for observer status to the Pacific Alliance, and you noted the first meeting between the Pacific Alliance and ASEAN. So perhaps in the discussion we can hear from our Indonesian representatives about how they perceive that step towards greater cooperation with the Pacific Alliance. Delighted now to invite the Foreign Minister of Mexico, José Antonio Meade Curibeña, who's just completed with his President a successful state visit to the United Kingdom on the other side of the Atlantic, and we look forward to your views on how the Pacific Alliance looks towards the Asia Pacific. Thank you very much, sir.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much and good day. I'm very thankful, first of all, with the government of Colombia as the host of this Magna event and having chosen to do it in this beautiful city. Many thanks, Maria Angela. And to the government of Colombia, thank you very much, President Santos. Thank you, John Chipman, for having invited us and brought us together and for moderating this panel. Maria Angela described this phenomena that we have been seeing in foreign politics, where there has been a migration from oceans to oceans, the concentration of things that went from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and now migrated to the Pacific Ocean. But there has been another phenomena that also draws our attention from the perspective of the subjects or the issues that the world is discussing and the way it is discussing it. We go on to a scheme where we begin to discuss by blocks. And if we would have stopped a few years ago to identify where the blocks of dialogue or where the process of integration would have worked faster, one might have thought from the start that Latin America was a good forum for it to occur. We shared history. We shared those who had achieved independence. We shared language, culture, aspirations in large part. We have spoken of integration for more than 200 years. But a few years ago, we wake up to a reality where the phenomena of integration have progressed much faster outside of Latin America. There is an integrated European bloc that has been able to reach agreements thanks to the crisis, but through the crisis they have built new institutions. And we turn to the Asia-Pacific region and we find opportunities for integration that have been successful and ambitious, such as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And we find that in this debate and this situation that Latin America still had a ways to go to build a mechanism for dialogue that would allow for this integration. Yesterday, President Santos mentioned how this idea came about, an idea that has not been around for a while and that was expressed in a treaty of only 7 pages and 2 main objectives. The first of these was to build a region of deep integration, and that to find this integration through the expression and free movement of goods, services, capital, and persons. And his second main objective, that was very explicit, that this platform be built and turned into a window that could project the countries of the alliance and to the world, and that would place a special emphasis on the Asia-Pacific region. I would like to say that this good idea has allowed for a good amount of deliverables that allowed us to begin to work on these objectives. We wanted a free movement of goods and services, and only 3 years after having signed this alliance, it is practically a reality to have a deep, modern, broad, and ambitious agreement. 92% of the taxes and the remaining 8% with a specific date that offers a platform to free trade, one that is robust, flexible, modern, and significant. We want there to be movement of persons. And we raised the visa requirements, and for the first time last year, in the case of Mexico, a country that receives nearly 30 million visitors a year, out of the 10 countries that most visitors bring to Mexico, 4 were from the Latin American region and 3 were our partners from the alliance. We had also stated that we wanted creativity in regards to moving capital and goods. As of today, our 4 stock markets are integrated and are part of a platform of movement that is the greatest in Latin America. The sum of these stock exchanges has more than $940,000 billion in capitalization. In regards to cooperation, what we are doing and how this has been able to find a concrete expression in regards to scholarships. What this means is that out of the objectives in this alliance, we are being able to conclude a first stage, and this first stage is concluding successfully. Now this alliance needs to meet the second one, which is to turn into an opportunity for protection in the whole region of the Asia Pacific. We had a first meeting in New York. From a perspective, this forum represents a second opportunity for dialogue. When there is the Asia Pacific Discussion Forum in Costa Rica, we will have a third opportunity for dialogue. And we would like to highlight in the Latin American Forum meeting in Mexico in April for it to be an opportunity for business persons from the Asia-Pacific region to meet with those from Latin America, because this element of support for businesses has allowed the alliance to have more dynamism, and it encourages the effort we do among governments. But what really pushes us forward is the challenge that businesses have stated, that we really be able to meet these objectives that we have set before us. So we are looking forward to this first corporate meeting between the countries of the alliance and those of APEC, and the economic forum we will have in April in Mexico. I hope to see more progress and that we can offer more continuity to this dialogue so we can report the progress made and what positive changes we have had in the General Assembly in New York. But this first step forward and this first set of deliverables triggered a dialogue, what Chipman referred to at the beginning, the revolution of the alliance itself, which has been very interesting. First, it triggered a circuit of dialogue among our business persons who got to know each other and now are engaging in business together, and allowed for an opportunity of dialogue between our promotion entities, which have found that it is better to present ourselves to the world within the alliance that ensures an agreement of dynamism and policies, and that within this joint opportunity from presenting ourselves to the world, we can highlight the advantages of each and every one of the countries. We found that there was an opportunity for dialogue in a natural way between the representatives of dialogues that are now accredited as Mexican, Chilean, Peruvian, and Colombian, but that now present themselves in a coordinated fashion and have benefits of doing so as members of the alliance. It also triggered a circuit of dialogue in issues that are very important to be able to spearhead the first objective of free movement in commerce, goods, services, capital, and persons. As of today, the alliance speaks of how we can reduce service costs and migratory rights to support, and as a second step, after having waived the visas, and how we can facilitate the stay of individuals that visit our countries from the perspective of business. We have seen that this movement must be supported by a good, secure environment of safety and security. You want the movement for individuals to always bring about prosperity. In order to do so, it has implied a dialogue such as one that we didn't have previously in regards to migratory movements and the exchange in security, which offers the relationship among countries and the platform of the alliance. It allows it to be much more solid. We have a fund for cooperation. We have found through this cooperation what we can do together and individually to benefit other countries. In regards to climate change, we present ourselves together, the 4 countries in Peru, and we contribute not only to the negotiation, but specifically as the Pacific Alliance to the climate change debate, finding specific contributions that we did in a joint fashion to the Green Fund and the structural support that we offered the negotiation that leaves from Peru with a critical path that allows us to be certain that Paris has an opportunity for success that is much greater to that which it has prior to the COP of Peru. And we hope to also be able to express ourselves in a combined fashion. We are now promoting projects for the region that can change its competitive facet. We have found that we want to have one network of electricity that goes from Colombia to Canada that will change its competitive position for the full Central America. We are looking for opportunities to promote foreign direct investment, and we are working to have our development banks speak so that they can find better support schemes for SMEs to a greater scale. We are also looking to have the sectors that in each of our countries develop in a greater fashion. We're also speaking of mining in a joint fashion. Mining that has its expressions from illegal exploitation to the joint cultural expression of our mining products, from what is done informally to industrially. And every day we have a greater participation, such as Maria Angela expressed, and with a greater content on behalf of observers and the member countries. So I hope this dialogue can serve as a testimony of a good idea that has met its objectives, that has expanded opportunities for dialogue, and allows the Alliance of the Pacific to be this mechanism of projecting this region to the world, and specifically in this setting with the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
With the governments can play in animating not only greater integration within the Pacific Alliance stage, but also exploring opportunities for trans-Pacific commercial activity. Our third speaker today, Claudio de la Puente Ribeiro, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Peru, who I believe spent some time in Australia, so embodies a trans-Pacific connection in that experience. Vice Minister.
Good day. I would like to begin by thanking the government of Colombia, Maria Angela Holguín, the Minister of Defense, Juan Carlos Pinzón, for this invitation and for having organized this event, and the same to John Shipment, the Director General of the IISS, for having invited us to participate and for organizing this timely event. I would also like to greet the Foreign Minister, Gonzalo Gutierrez. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us on this occasion as he would have liked to. The organization of this event confirms the vocation of the countries of the Pacific Alliance to create stronger ties with Asia and to be an important actor in a renewed trans-Pacific relationship. But it's also a very tangible expression of the growing communication and the exciting perspectives of this organization. Only 4 years has made concrete steps forward towards a closer, deep integration. It has been able to attract various organizations from the academic world, business world, as can be seen in this kind of event. Let's look back into the history, how the process began. The Pacific Alliance was not the result of chance. Rather, it was the result of a pause and reflection to be able to materialize the desire for working together that in some cases was affected by different ideological models among its members. This was the case of prior experience, such as in the Latin American area and other limited efforts to have an exchange of goods and services. In October 2010, it was formalized in April 2011. At that moment, the President, Alan Garcia, and its foreign minister, who is with us today, was asking themselves why we should resign ourselves to progressing at a slow speed using existing models. Why not build something that was cutting edge, a core of countries that would combine their economic desires with solid democracies and convene on the best way to insert ourselves in global processes. It is an initiative and a deep integration that was able to promote the free movement of goods, services, capital, and persons. The Alliance of the Pacific has a very singular feature in regard to its origin and makeup. Perhaps it is the first experience of regional integration based on what there is in common and not so much the geographic neighbors, which has been the criteria that in some cases has distinguished these kinds of alliance. This process of deep integration has been taken on by Peru as a state policy. The government of Peru is very committed to its objectives and development. The idea is not to compete with other organizations. The alliance is available to serve this region, and those that have inspired the standards that were inspired by the founding members. From its origins, Asia and the Asia-Pacific region have been at the core of the priorities of this alliance. This idea was summed up in April 2011 as one of the objectives that were written out in the Framework Convention of 2011. This expresses the shared vision of the member countries to have closer ties with the more dynamic trends of commerce and investment in the world. And it's also a reflection of the combination of the paths that have been covered by the four countries of the alliance individually in different moments through various means, facing towards the Asia-Pacific. In the case of Peru, this projection was done more than 25 years ago. In the diplomatic scene, they established embassies in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and commercial offices in Taipei and the consulate in Auckland, and they opened embassies in Philippines and New Zealand, contributing to bringing closer ties with these countries. And there was a progressive increase in the trade and investments. And parallel to this diplomatic presence, Peru began to work towards the PBEC and then the PEC and the work groups of APEC so that it could later fulfill the aspiration of becoming full members of APEC. This process came together with signing multiple free trade agreements with important commercial partners in the region, China, Korea, Singapore, and Thailand, as well as agreements for the promotion and protection of investment and treaties to avoid double taxation. Soon we will have negotiations with India and then Indonesia, and Peru participates actively in the ambitious agreements of the Trans-Pacific, and it should allow for a privileged access to Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam, Australia, and New Zealand. All of this progress that has been made does not mean that Peru has neglected its relationship with other partners. More than 25% of our foreign trade is covered by FTAs, which includes the United States, Canada, the European Union, and other regional agreements with Latin American partners.
These developments, along with the consistent implementation of economic and tax policies, responsible ones, has contributed to the growth of Peru in the last decade and a half. It continues to be one of the most dynamic and stable economies in the region and a good destination for foreign investment. We continue to work on this so that the benefits of economic growth can reach all Peruvians. Asian countries, of course, are not foreign to these developments. We are some of the best in the region in terms of economic freedom, according to the index published in 2012. According to the World Economic Forum, we are one of the most competitive ones and offer one of the best environments according to the Doing Business Index. It is estimated that our economy will be one of the most growth-laden in the coming years. As we have reminded already, the countries of the Pacific Alliance have made progress in integrating different cooperation mechanisms. We are all part of the FOCALE and others. Also, as it has been mentioned yesterday, Peru, Chile, and Mexico are part of APEC. And so we are more than happy to be a part of this forum. We are happy to continue supporting this legitimate Colombian aspiration. Peru will once again be leading APEC next year. taking on this important responsibility in the year 2018. What does the Pacific Alliance mean for our countries? The Pacific Alliance, the Pacific area is home to more than half of the world's population. The 21 economies of the APEC are today make up half of the world economy. These are some of the most important economic partners of the countries of the alliance, and these relationships are growing day by day. The interest that the alliance has elicited is reflected in the number of countries that have asked to be observers, 32, and it includes some of the largest economies in the world, 16 of which are part of the Pacific Basin. We are committed to strengthening cooperation, the fifth pillar of the alliance, as the vehicle through which the observer countries relate and interact with the alliance. To this end, as Chancellor Olguin reminded, we are designing and implementing cooperation agendas in areas of mutual interest among observer countries. There has been progress. Complementing this important line of action, the Pacific Alliance is also developing interinstitutional relationships with other organizations of the Asia-Pacific, such as our work with APEC and ASEAN recently pointed out. I'd like to dedicate a few moments to discuss Peru's relationship with Asian countries. I'd like to begin by saying that these are long relationships, especially in the case of Japan and China, countries that we established diplomatic relations with in the year 1870. Currently, Peru has the most important Chinese community in all of Latin America and the second most important Japanese one. This reflects different circumstances, such as the relevance of the Pacific to Peru. With a distance of almost 3,000 kilometers, the geography and history of Peru have been intimately related to the Pacific and its resources. Peru has raised its relationships and cooperation with China and Korea since 2012. This is part of our task of integrating the economy and establishing more interministerial cooperation. We are working on the effective transfer of knowledge and technology and strengthening educational, scientific, and cultural topics. This has gone hand in hand with a strong dynamization of economic ties. China is today Peru's first economic partner, along with the United States, with an exchange of more than $15 billion. These numbers are growing and extend to various areas of the Peruvian economies. In our relationship to the Asia-Pacific, Peru hopes to more fully take advantage of the potential that these partners and our soon-to-be partners provide, generating more added value, stimulating innovation as a tool for development, especially stimulating SMEs, improving national infrastructure, especially in terms of transportation and communication, and among other things, increasing the connectivity by air and by sea with the Asia-Pacific countries, increasing our links with academic institutions in the Asian Pacific, increasing mutual understanding, and increasing knowledge and technology transfer, promoting more touristic movement between our countries, which is very important, and establishing links for mutual benefit in the fields of security and defense. This has happened with countries such as Korea, with whom we are producing fighter jets and training jets. We expect for there to be more progress too. So encouraged by John Chipman's comment with regards to my experience as ambassador in Australia, where I was ambassador from the year 2005 to 2010. In fact, here I've come across some of my old friends, including the then Australian and Latin American Business Council, the director. It was difficult for us, although we did it very enthusiastically. It was difficult to promote our countries in the Asia Pacific and in Australia, and some of the difficulties that we came across to generate. We wanted to generate a single unit. Nowadays, the countries on the other side of the Pacific are opening embassies here on our continent. Australia opened their embassy here in 2010, and I'm sure that other countries will be doing so as well. This is perhaps this creature that is only yet 4 years old. It's in good health, it's walking on its own 2 feet, and it can interact with its parents on the other side of the Pacific. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much for describing the efforts you've made throughout the Asia-Pacific region. And of course, in the next session, we'll hear as to how the countries of the Asia-Pacific are now defining their own policies to the Pacific Alliance. It's a delight now to welcome the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile. I had a pleasure of meeting him 9 or 10 months ago in Chile to discuss this event. Edgardo Riveros, the podium is yours. Edgardo.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I would certainly like to thank the invitation to this conference. I'd like to thank the IISS and particularly John Chipman for the effort he has made, and of course for the warm welcome that the government of Colombia has offered the President of the Republic, President Santos, their Minister of Foreign Affairs, María Ángela Holguín, and of course the Minister of Defense, Juan Carlos Pinzón, as well as the presence of each one of you. Frankly, being the last one to speak, I could just say, me too. And that would be enough. Because, of course, I can only reiterate the positions stated by María Ángela, José Antonio, and Claudio. But I would like to present a few ideas, and the first is about the context in which we act. Integration has been discussed, but the truth is that as of today, integration is a priority because it is no longer an option, it is a need. In a world of blocks that interact and have conversations among them, integration becomes essential in order to effect development policies, foreign relations policies that are efficient. It's true that some of our countries in our region, Latin America, have made progress individually, have opened up their economies, have interacted. Claudio recently pointed out, and it's true for our country as well, he pointed out the broad range of free trade agreements, economic complementation agreements, all sorts of trade agreements. In Peru, more than 80%, much like Peru, 80% of the economy in Chile enjoys agreements of this sort. But the individual effort of these states is not enough. That is why there's a need to generate agreements. Agreements between those states that share a similar vision, a similar development, and a similar potential that they can share. And in that context, the globalized world can be thought of as adversarial, it can be suspected, or it can be seen as an opportunity. Certainly, we subscribe to the latter. looking at the process of globalization in the entire world as an opportunity that can be taken advantage of more effectively by states if they join forces with each other. And in that regard, the Pacific Alliance has been shown to have special capacities. The Pacific Alliance represents an association that is economically and politically relevant, and in this context, it is notable for its desire to become a truly regional platform. Our country has reaffirmed its commitment to the Pacific Alliance. As the Minister Holguín pointed out, there have been changes in government, in administration. But this is truly a state policy, and the foreign relations of the country, so long as they are seen as state policies, must have continuity between one administration and another. In Chile, we have taken the view that the development of the Pacific Alliance is a state policy, and that is why, once again, and this is an opportunity to reaffirm our will to work with Peru, Mexico, and Colombia along these lines for development. Having said that, I would like to mention as well that the progress made, particularly with the Marco Protocol, we have to continue making progress along the lines that the Mexican minister said. We began with the liberalization of 92% of the goods market and conversations in order to open up the service market, government purchases, telecommunications, and others. However, applying this protocol, the Framework Convention, is an immediate challenge because it is about making progress in institutionalizing this convention. And in this manner, we can hope to consolidate. And this is a presidential mandate that we have received. We must strengthen the 5 pillars of the Pacific Alliance. By coming here today and discussing with the Minister Heraldo Muñoz, who apologizes for not being here today, the movement of goods, services, capital, and people, and cooperation, we can also chalk this up to progress. We also have to make progress in the other pillars, the single windows for reducing the cost of the logistics of foreign trade, the agreement for cooperation in customs, regulatory cooperation. These are for specific areas such as cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, and others. Developing joint technical standards for education and mining. Certainly, we also have to make improvements in the movement of people. And I think that what has been discussed here in terms of students and others is very significant because we're placing an emphasis on people, communities, and citizens. There are other immediate challenges. We have to go deeper in risk capital or venture capital. We have to integrate finances, tourism, tax, entrepreneurship, and others. However, we are optimistic with regards to the development of the Pacific Alliance because I believe that we share the 4 of these countries 3 fundamental factors. We are countries that enjoy open policies with free trade agreements. We are countries with stable democratic systems, and we have rules and investment mechanisms that are transparent for our commercial partners. Those three elements, I believe, lend certainty and are key. We also share challenges. Yesterday, President Santos mentioned something which is very clear. And that we have to face head-on. We are also societies with gross inequalities. We have made great efforts to take on poverty, particularly extreme poverty, but the degrees of inequality continue to be a huge challenge. And in this regard, we must take a look at what we can do to address this in terms of foreign policy. So in this context, our relationship to Asia becomes important. We must highlight not only trade and investment, but also cooperation in other significant areas such as science, technology, and innovation. In order to face global challenges such as climate change. In effect, I believe that we have developed a way of addressing these issues in conjunction. Let us take a look at the recent meeting in Peru. We thought that whatever we couldn't advance in Lima would be difficult to advance into Paris. And that is why today we face this very large challenge, because it's not just about our current generation, but about future generations. Looking towards Asia and towards the Pacific in general, but specifically Asia, I must say that what takes place in Asia and in the Asia Pacific affects us very much. The political processes that are taking place in Asia, the economic reform that are taking place in Asia, the greater or lesser dynamism of their economies, all of this is important to us, and this has been significant. When there was a crisis at the end of the 90s, the impact was noted here. Many of our countries suffered, and therefore economic cycles, the greater or lesser dynamism of their economies, security in transportation infrastructure, and the security of their main investors. All of this is important, and we must think the interest of many of the countries of the Asia Pacific for the development of the Pacific Alliance. That figure, that capacity as observers, and their interest in being observers of the Pacific Alliance fills us with satisfaction because it indicates trust. And it is our task as members of the Pacific Alliance to clearly define the role, the perspectives of the observer countries. And certainly, we see their contribution as very positive and satisfactory. The idea of being an observer and their interest in being observers comes from many regions of the world. Certainly the European perspective interests us as well. But in sharing the Pacific Ocean, this is also an essential factor.
Just as what Clara La Puente highlighted in the case of Peru, we already have a significant relationship with the Asia region. Therefore, what we can do together with the Pacific Alliance is important because all the experience that we have is made available to the other. And this has been done in stages, definitely since the 19th century when relations were opened. But a very important occurrence for Chile was when it entered the APEC in 1994. And having been the host country for the APEC in the year 2004, 10 years later. Therefore, what will occur with Peru as the host country of the APEC is very significant and important, and a few years later, then once again Chile receiving this meeting, because there's a very important and significant dynamic that is occurring, and of course we look forward to the possibility of Colombia entering the APEC as a element that will complement the actions of these 4 countries that are part of this effort made in convergence. For us, the numbers are significant because Asia received 48% of our exports, more than $37 billion, and we also received imports from Asia in our country. 31% of all imports have come from Asia. And as I said, I believe that everything that we can do looking forward also looks forward to materializing a free trade area in the Asia-Pacific region. I would like to wrap up with an idea that we have been presenting, and I would like to clarify completely. It is about strengthening our commitment with the alliance, the Pacific Alliance, but we believe it is possible to develop some ties under the concept of convergence in diversity with other efforts made in integration in Latin America. And I believe specifically in the Mercosur, but being realistic about it. Convergence in diversity, because we understand that we do not agree in some subjects. So if our objective is taxes with the Mercosur, clearly it will be difficult to progress in that regard, but there are so many other subjects on which we can establish synergies: migration, physical integration, cultural issues, and I believe that we have made progress in this regard as well. There have been 2 important dialogues. One was here in Cartagena, another in Santiago, in the last months of 2014. So this too is something that is worth maturing, watching closely. The presence of the foreign affairs ministers in Santiago and those of commerce here in Cartagena as well. I think that was important, and it has facilitated a dialogue that we can look forward to. But frankly, I believe that we have more than enough reasons to be optimistic about the development of the Pacific Alliance, and I believe this meeting will be very useful to reinforce that idea. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Vice Minister, and as did our first speaker, the way in which the observer states of the Pacific Alliance might organize themselves in order to ensure that they develop for themselves a status genuinely different from those who are not observers. I know that at least 1 or 2 of the Asia-Pacific states have established Pacific Alliance task forces within their business community and the like. And of course, it would be interesting if they had, as it were, opposite numbers within the Pacific Alliance states with whom to deal and discuss. But I think this question of how specifically the Asia-Pacific observers of the Pacific Alliance are able to develop genuinely useful practical links with the Pacific Alliance will be something we can raise now, but also in our next session. We're now open for comments. I'll take 4 or 5 and then come back to the panel for final comments before we close. If you can just raise your name tags, and I'll ask a number of you to go in order. I might not be able to get everyone in, but there's a number who I will, including starting first with Ambassador Thorne, and I've got Chung Min Lee and Francois Borg. Thank you very much. Ambassador Thorne.
Thank you. Thank you, John, and ISS for organizing this very interesting and helpful conference, and also congratulations to Colombia and President Santos for hosting this event. and thank you for the opportunity just to say a few words. As a senior advisor, the mission that Secretary Kerry entrusted me with is clear: to support efforts in elevating a shared prosperity agenda as a crucial element of U.S. foreign policy. And the premise of that is that security, stability, and prosperity are inexorably intertwined. You can't have prosperity without stability and security, and there is no sustainable stability without prosperity. When Latin America and the Caribbean prosper, the United States does too. Reflecting the region's importance, the Obama administration has maintained a high level of engagement by the President, the Vice President, Secretary Kerry, and other members of the Cabinet. The commitment to the Americas will continue next month with President Obama leads the U.S. delegation to the Summit of the Americas in Panama. For the region to remain competitive globally, we must work to build the Americas into a shared, integrated platform for global success. The Pacific Alliance exemplifies that sentiment, and the Pacific Alliance provides a vision of an open, integrated, globally competitive Latin America. We congratulate the Pacific Alliance on the progress it has already made, including the signing of a plurilateral free trade agreement, eliminating visa requirements for its citizens, instituting educational exchange and scholarship programs, and integrating its capital markets. The global economy is changing. Supply chains have become more complicated, with components sourced globally and then brought together for final assembly before the end product is shipped around the world. The Pacific Alliance's policy initiatives include creation of common rules of origin, harmonized regulatory frameworks, and improved customs services are well targeted toward being important links in those value chains. The Pacific Alliance members are key U.S. partners in the region. The United States has bilateral FTAs with each member. We clearly have a shared vision for the development of the global economy and already are working together in many ways. At the outset of his administration, President Obama made a strategic decision to increase focus on the Asia-Pacific region. We are working to promote regional economic and trade architecture that is rules-based and provides an open, fair, and transparent framework that will grow trade and investment opportunities in the region. The rules of doing business in the 21st century are changing for the better and will reflect the shared prosperity we all want. The Pacific Alliance growth-oriented engagement with each other and the Asia-Pacific region are a further step in that direction, which the United States congratulates and looks forward to supporting a more competitive America. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you very much for that endorsement. I want to bring in 4 or 5 agents to make give their reactions to this and perhaps give some sense of their own policies towards the region. So I had first Barry Desker from Singapore, and then Chung Min Lee, and then Francois Aisbourg, and then Sanjaya Baru. Barry Desker.
Thank you, John. For Southeast Asia, with the combined GDP in ASEAN of US 2.4 trillion in 2013, an institutional relationship with the Pacific Alliance represents a partnership of equals, creates a bridge across the Pacific, and provides an opportunity to increase trade, investment, and services linkages. Singapore was admitted as an observer of the Pacific Alliance in February 2014 and has been appointed by ASEAN as the coordinator for ASEAN-Pacific Alliance relations. Why has this move been made to develop linkages with the Pacific Alliance? I think it's important to note that ASEAN has been trying to reach out to Mercosur for more than 30 years, and it has developed good political linkages with annual meetings in New York. But we have found that there has been no progress in attempting to develop a free trade agreement or partnership agreements which look at broader economic arrangements. We believe that the Pacific Alliance provides this opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Hammer from Australia.
The Australian government. I come from the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I'll also be brief. For those not familiar with Australia, we moved between being the world's 12th...
Bit closer to the microphone.
Thanks. For those not familiar with Australia, we moved from being between the world's 12th and 14th largest economy. We vie with Mexico for that position. We're heavily integrated. Is this microphone okay?
But you have to speak towards it.
Okay, thank you. I think I've got it now. So we are heavily integrated into Asia. We have enjoyed 24 years of continuous economic growth now, partly because of that integration. So we know Asia very well. 10% of Australian households speak an Asian language at home. And I just want to make a comment about what we see when we look towards the Pacific Alliance. What we see are 4 countries that are invested in democracy, rule of law, and a rules-based international system. That matters to us. But also, as others have mentioned, these are countries adopting a liberal, free market set of economic policies, policies able to survive, as the Colombian and Chilean foreign ministers pointed out, transitions in political leadership. So this makes the Pacific Alliance countries very attractive to Australia, and we're hopeful that you are pioneering a new political economic paradigm for Latin America. So congratulations on progress so far, and of course we are one of the observer countries for the Alliance. Thank you.
François Bourg.
Thank you very much, John. The theme of this morning's session, the Pacific Alliance countries in Asia, invites a geo-economic question. Geo-economic meaning the application of economic policy towards geopolitical aims. And so my question is the following. What is the role and the place of China in the manner in which the Pacific Alliance countries look at their relationship with Asia? Is China seen as the de facto senior partner? After all, it is the world's second largest economy and may soon be the first one. Is China one Asian partner amongst others? Or is there a perceived need to hedge against excessive dependence vis-à-vis China by broadening the relationship of the Pacific Alliance countries towards other Asian partners? And when listening to Ambassador Hammer a few seconds ago, where he made the relationship between, democracy, rules-based, things which do not immediately call to mind China, I was wondering whether others here didn't also have this question in mind. And it's not an academic one. Of course, the TPP does not include China.
Choo-Min Lee from Korea.
Thank you very much, John. I have 2 quick suggestions for our Pacific Alliance members, and speaking totally on a personal basis. I think the word observer is great, but it sounds too static. And so perhaps you should consider moving observers as partners. And so if we are partners to the Pacific Alliance, I'm sure there will be much more proactive engagement from the Asian side. Number 2, taking a cue from the EU, is it possible that the 4 of you will be able to nominate one person, a super minister of Pacific Affairs, Alliance Affairs, on a rotating basis, so that there will be a common face to the Pacific Alliance from the Asian perspective? And number 3, I think the role of the media is crucial in rebranding these 4 great countries in Asia. My question is related to what Francois said, and specifically to the ministers of Foreign Affairs of Mexico and Colombia. You have crucial security ties with the U.S., as many of us do in Asia, and yet our growing ties with China economically is something that is going to last for a long time. How will you balance your security ties with Washington and your growing economic ties with China? Thank you.
From India, Sanjaya Baru.
Thank you, John. So my question in some ways is a continuation of the earlier two questions. As the Director for Geoeconomics and Strategy at the IISS, I was pleasantly struck by the fact that we heard 4 foreign ministers speak only about trade. I was wondering, sitting here, that if we had the trade ministers of these 4 countries in this session, what statement, how their statement would be any different. And I think that is a strength, as Chung Min Lee just mentioned, and Francois Hesburg, that this is a geo-economic alliance, where focus from all the statements has been on trade, on investment, and on integrating with the rising Asia. But I was also struck by the comment of the last speaker, Minister Riveros, which reminded me of what I think Fukuyama says, which is that the 3 pillars of the Pacific Alliance is there are free markets, rule of law, and democracy. And that brings in politics into the discussion. So I think it will be useful to hear from the foreign ministers some perspective on how they look at the evolving politics of Asia.
Felipe Larin from Chile.
Gracias, John.
Thank you, John. Congratulations for a very interesting conference. I would like to, from the perspective of having participated in the creation of the Pacific Alliance as the Minister of Finance in the previous administration in my country, and to think that this, as Edgardo Riveros, this is something that goes beyond governments, administrations, and just as was said by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia, this is something that is much more than a country and a group of countries than a specific government. And that's why the question I have is in regards to the institutionality of the alliance. One of the issues that I believe is central to developing the alliance is how we are going to consolidate institutionality, how we can deepen the alliance, and how this can be made compatible with the necessary process of growth that the alliance will have towards other countries. And I present this here because there's a certain tension. One could think that it's necessary to deepen the institutionality first and then expand. But we face the reality that there are a series of countries that would like to be members. Examples are countries that are advanced considerably, have completed their process of membership, such as Costa Rica or the case of Panama. And we heard a few interventions here of countries that come from the Asia-Pacific region that might also be interested in having not only of partners, of associate members, of having commercial relations, but of being members perhaps in the future. So here, when I speak of institutionality, I'm not speaking of a great bureaucracy. I believe one of the positive features of the alliance is that there's very little bureaucracy and decisions are made quickly and implemented, and there is not very much bureaucracy. But I would like to ask how you see that this institutionality can be deepened as well as its tension with the process of expansion. Okay, Mr. Kim from Korea.
Continuando la lengua, déjeme decir en español.
So allow me to say this in Spanish. Today we noted the dynamic relationship between Latin America and the Asia Pacific. This is not an option. It might be a need. But looking back, in the mid-90s, there was already a great interest from Latin America in the Asia-Pacific region. But unfortunately, the financial crisis in Asia, 98 and 99, slowed down that moment and delayed the dynamism 5 years or even 10 years.
Now, my question is, when back then there was something lost, it was momentum. But now, if there's any risk, it'll be the risk of instability or vulnerability born from the deep interregional integration. So how can we control those risk factors at the national level or at the interregional or regional level as the Pacific Alliance?
For the four foreign ministers. As far as I can understand, the most important issue for the establishment of such kind of a nice relationship between the two parts of the world is how to establish the so-called political trust. But I'm sorry to say that this kind of job is quite well, how would you say, as you know that some people in this part of the world has some kind of mentality of China threat or fear of China. As you know that China has made great contributions to the economic growth of this part of the world. So why do you have this kind of mentality? And some newspapers even use such kind of words as Chinese imperialists. So I'm sorry to say that in order to further strengthen this kind of bilateral relationship between our two sides, we needed to do away with this kind of mentality. And my second question is for Chairman Chipman. And it seems to me that the dialogue has attached great importance to the so-called security. But as a Chinese scholar, I would like to point out that the most important issue for this trans-Pacific relationship is economic and trade relationship, not security. So can I say that you are putting the wrong wine in a nice bottle?
Thank you very much. I think the word security has been mentioned a few times in this first session, but I think if you look at the agenda, there's an enormous amount of geo-economic issues that are being addressed, trade and investment and the like, and I've gone to very many defense and security conferences, and I think they feel quite different from the mix of subjects that this one is addressing, which naturally have to combine economic and security questions, but there is, I think, a very generous balance being given to the economic and the broader issues in this one. There are a number of other people who want to take the floor, but I have to give a couple of minutes to each of you to respond. I think the main themes that came out of these questions was how does one better organize the relations between the Pacific Alliance and those friends it has in the Asia Pacific? Is partnership a more active and stronger phrase than observer? Might be there a way to have special envoys from the Pacific Alliance towards Asia Pacific to actually give meaning to that second large objective of the Pacific Alliance, to be able to export itself to the Asia Pacific more effectively and import the Asia Pacific, as it were, more into its own region. And there has been the China question raised. There are people who have argued that the TPP is a geopolitical instrument by geoeconomic disguise, and there is this delicate balance between having extraordinarily strong economic relations with China and a security relationship with the United States that has carefully to be navigated. So a number of issues were put on the table. I hope that we can get some practical suggestions as to how that cooperation between the Pacific Alliance and Asia Pacific can be best organized. And I would invite each of the ministers to take a couple of minutes each in the order in which they spoke, or perhaps I'll take them in reverse order. Perhaps Edgardo Rivera, a couple of minutes from you first, then Claudio, and end up with the Foreign Minister of Colombia.
Muy bien. Está funcionando.
Very well. My microphone is working. Here, we discussed the topic of China. Undoubtedly, China is a reference point. To say anything else would be to be blind to reality. Nevertheless, I also want to be frank. In Asia, China being an extraordinarily important reference, it is not the only one. And the challenge is to see how other Asian states can develop closer relationships. We can offer numbers. Effectively, what I pointed out here, our commerce with Asia corresponds in 52% of it is with China, but 21% of it is with Korea, 11% with India, 6% with Taiwan. All that to say that there is the opportunity for diversification, and certainly we would like for the development of trade with Asia, which is essentially in commodities, could generate added value as well in the fields of food and foodstuffs. I think that there are opportunities as well. The other thing I think is worth mentioning is the institutionalization, which Felipe Larraín mentioned. I think that one of the great merits of the Pacific Alliance is that it started off with the idea, and institutionalization will have to serve the idea and not the other way around, rather than creating the institutions and then going in search of an idea. Here, it happened the other way. But I do believe that the institutionalization will be necessary. A perspective on the Framework Convention. There are institutional aspects that are ineludible. There are things that we need to control, because as we develop closer relationships and more important relationships towards the rest of the world, we will doubtlessly require the necessary mechanisms for resolving controversies. And it's interesting, the idea of changing the name observer to partner. Lastly, in terms of politics, the truth is that politicians, we've had to learn about economics, and economists have had to learn about politics. And frankly, the two of these are quite implicated. It seems unlikely that we can't place these two topics on the table at the same time, because I think that so long as they are separated and held apart, we will not achieve the success that we seek. So I feel that this relationship is key, and of course, political structures within countries are not foreign to results. Understanding this as a central aspect of globalized commerce and stable globalized commerce, well, my 2 minutes are up, but I want to be rigorous. So I'm going to stop here. Claudio, I hope you can hear me. First of all, I wanted to point out that it has been very stimulating to hear the different comments of the participants. And it's nice to see that there's such a positive appreciation of what the Pacific Alliance means and its prospects. We have been working very hard so that the role of observers can be translated into useful and concrete activities in terms of cooperation. Each of us has identified certain specific areas that we have been designing and working on. So I was very pleased with Australia's comment. With regards to of an additional capacity on the part of certain Asian countries with regards to the Pacific Alliance, observers participate on several conditions. The criteria are very clearly established in the Framework Convention. There are not many criteria, but they are very clear. That is not to say, as Edgardo was so aptly commenting a minute ago, we should not ignore the role of some very heavyweight economies throughout the world, but every country has a place in this alliance. And I feel that these are not fundamental with regards to the benefits of a broader cooperation with each one of the countries. I would also like to point out, apropos of a comment with regards to the suggestion of a president that could represent more permanently the Pacific Alliance. I think that one of the features of the alliance has been its rapid institutional development and very little bureaucracy with regards to other regional models for cooperation and integration. In addition, as was pointed out, the participation of our countries has to do with state policies. We've taken on this alliance as a long-term state policy. So whoever is the minister or vice minister at this point in time is in charge of offering their countries a horizon of stability and long-term prospects for the alliance. That's what I had to say. Thank you very much, John. Every one of the countries of the alliance preserves its own identity within the broader effort of developing a common agenda, which is what the alliance proposes. Each country has its own regional factors, its own dialogue circuits, and what the alliance has done, in my opinion, and what has made it so attractive and useful at this point in time, is that each of us, preserving our own spaces for diversity, the objectives of the alliance also assigns a common task for the countries that make it up. I believe that the architecture of the alliance, in terms of its flexibility and its limited institutions and bureaucracy, has meant an advantage. I think that the difference between the ambition of the four founding countries and the flexibility that we offer to observers can be used and responds to many of the questions that have been presented here. The political objectives of the alliance means that Mexico will discuss everything with Colombia, Chile, and Peru. And that indicates the topics that we discuss. We want to discuss commerce, visas, cooperation, security, tourism. But with regards to the observers, we have to identify what elements bring the observer into the alliance. We have to take into account what the observer wants to discuss with the countries of the alliance, and we have to find value in that dialogue. The value we'll find with each of those countries will be different. It won't be the same dialogue with certain countries of given characteristics as with others. So within that activity and that flexibility, we can find mechanisms that allow us to enrich the dialogue with, for instance, China, and at the same time enrich our dialogue with other countries of Southeast Asia. So I think that the scheme's flexibility is its main advantage. We have broad opportunities to develop dialogues with the countries that make up the alliance. But developing spaces of dialogue with observers and the alliance that can become a real deliverable linked to the reality of that particular country allows great flexibility and therefore great strength. You can imagine what this has meant in internal discussion, all of the questions that you have brought up. Institutionalization. How much should we grow the alliance in bureaucratic terms or in giving it a specific institution? Or should we continue working as we have been, in which the pro tempore president plays an important role and is the one that guides the alliance during that year? If we begin to grow, and this has been discussed among presidents, if we create bureaucracies, it is very likely that the alliance will lose its dynamism and creativity. So in that sense, I do think that we should work to move at a quicker pace with regards to what we've generated in many countries. But we should also continue to work with the existing institutions to prevent it from becoming a bureaucratic behemoth without direction. If anything has been effective with the alliance is that the four countries have focused on the fact that this is an economic and commercial forum. We are not a political mechanism. We don't take any sort of political position either within the region or in the world. We are focused on how we can grow and how we can become more competitive and how we can help our business people to understand that with the support of governments, they can arrive in other countries under better conditions. That's what we have been focusing on and what we will continue to focus on. And in that joint labor between business people and government, oftentimes we would like to see business people freer in Asia, for them to feel that they have a partner, but for them not to be afraid either of the distance or of the unknown. And we believe that the alliance is that vehicle that will be able to take these business people with much more ease to spaces that, in the Colombian case, we are further behind than our partners here. A last word on China. China is one among other Asian countries. Neither can we forget that for many of those who are sitting here, China is their main commercial partner or their second commercial partner. And that generates a different kind of relationship. So of course that relationship will grow a little more quickly, and that is useful and productive for all parties. So it has no special connotations other than that it is a primary commercial partner for many of us. Thank you, Minister.
In about 25 minutes, going to return to this hall to see the view from the other side of the Pacific. Dino Patel and others who I wasn't able to include in this session, I hope will be also animating the audience in the second. Could I invite you all to thank the ministers for their presentations and to return here at 11 o'clock.